Leia Healthcare. It's good to live. Proud sponsor of the Real Health podcast with Carl Henry.
Hello and welcome to the Real Health podcast with me, Carl Henry, in association with Leia Healthcare. Folks, I hope all is well. If you're a regular listener to the show, you'll know that from time to time I speak to famous Irish people who've had an amazing career to find out what meant the most to them and get their life lessons and pick their brains and learn from them, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, and what we can learn from their career. On this week's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by broadcaster, household name, and legend in her own right, Mary Kennedy. Mary, welcome to the Real Health podcast.
It's lovely to be here.
How's it going? How are you?
Good, yeah.
Times are changing after 40 years in RTE. You're moving on.
Yes, well, I don't really have a choice. I'm staff, so I'm 65, and when you get to 65 and you're staff, you have to retire. But I'm retiring from Nationwide because that's my day job, if you like. But I'm hoping to, do other things, but at a different pace. Because, I've got a grandson now, and I suppose my priorities have changed in that he's going to be living in Limerick, and I want to be able to see him from time to time, not just in and out.
And what age is your grandson?
He's 8 months.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
I have a 10-month-old, so I'm going through all the processes.
Is it a boy or a girl?
Boy.
Yeah, what do you call him?
Alex.
Alex.
Yeah, it's
This
a great
little fella's
it's a
Paddy.
great time, and it
Yeah.
makes you reassess things.
Well, I think it puts things in perspective. Now, yours is your son. This is my grandson. And I suppose my daughter and her husband are at the stage you're at, where you're exhausted. I'm not exhausted. I get to do the nice things. And I was just thinking, when he's playing on the floor, I'm watching him and playing on the floor with him. Whereas when my children were playing on the floor, I say, okay, they're happy. I'll go and put on the dishwasher or something like that, or I'll boil the kettle. And I just think it's so nice not to have that pressure, to just live in the moment and to enjoy, because they are such little beauties.
So retirement is something that excites you, that you're looking forward to, I think, or is it something that scares you?
No, it doesn't scare me. No, I don't mind change. I wouldn't have chosen to retire from Nationwide. No, I wouldn't have chosen. I absolutely love Nationwide. I love the whole ethos of it. I love going around the country. I love meeting people. I love even the sense of anticipation when I get into the car to go somewhere new, knowing that I'm going to meet new people, and also the welcome that Nationwide gets everywhere they go. Because our job is not to kind of try and trick people into anything. Our job is to find out what's going well for a community or a group or a person, and to showcase that. It's a nice job to have.
And how many years were you doing
15.
it?
15.
Wow, really?
Yeah, 15. Before that, I was doing open house with Marty Whelan, and that was fun, and that went on for 6 years. And when it finished, I missed it. I missed the whole studio bit. I missed the live bit, and I know now I will miss Nationwide. But that's part of life as well.
How did you get into broadcasting? Was it something you always wanted to do?
No.
Was it something that you fell into?
Yeah, I think so. I trained as a teacher. I was a secondary school teacher in Clondalkin, where I grew up. I taught Irish and French, and I had just started full time. And I saw an ad in the paper way back, for though when they used to put ads in the papers for jobs like that. And I just kind of said, I wonder would I get that. And I just sent off an application, thinking that I wouldn't get a reply, because there was this kind of this belief that, you had to know somebody to get into RTE. And I knew nobody. I didn't actually even know where RTE was in Donnybrook. Now, I had been in Belfield, but I still didn't have a sense of Donnybrook, because Donnybrook was a village and a posh village. Okay. And I'm from Clondalkin, and we used to get the 51 bus into town and then the 10 straight out to the Belfield complex, which was in the 70s out. Total concrete jungle. Now it's fab. Mm-hmm. And I went to lectures, the library, and the running track. Those were the 3 places I went, got back on the number 10 and came back to Clondalkin. So I didn't know anything about RTE, but I applied and then I got to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. And I suppose I had this feeling that people would say, you know, who does she think she is? Like, I'm convent educated, where you were told don't get above your station, you know, that kind of a way. That was the way it was back then.
Wow.
Yeah. So, that's to answer your question in a very long winded way. That's how I ended up doing part-time work. I was teaching and doing part-time continuity, which was announcing the different programmes. And then little bits would come along, you know, and then...
when did you decide to make the big leap then?
Well, it was kind of gradual. Because I took a career break when my 3rd child was born. And during that career break, I was doing a little bit of news reading, just a few hours a day because the children were small. And then the Eurovision came along. And I had been a fan of the Eurovision. I'd been a fan since Dana won in 1970 because we used to sit and watch it as a family. And then it came to Ireland. Well, first of all, in 1981, when it was in the RDS and Michelle Rocca and Pat Kenny, in 1981 when Doireann Ní Bhríon presented it, I was an understudy and I just got bitten by the bug. So when it came back in 1993, I auditioned. And I didn't get it. And then we won again. So in 1994, I auditioned and I didn't get it. And then in 1995, I think they felt sorry for me and said, "Oh, Chambers, she's still there. We better give it to her."
So you're determined then,
well,
without a doubt.
Yes.
You can hear it in your voice when you talk about basically anything, to be honest. But you have a determination in you.
Yeah. And I mean, that was, I suppose, the turning point. I said, "Okay, well, let's give this a go." Determined, well, kind of conscientious, I would say, conscientious. People sometimes say to me, "Are you ambitious?" And I'm not ambitious. I'm really not ambitious because I temper the things I would go for by the other needs in my life. And the needs at that time were around children and I was separating. So, you know, I didn't want to take on something that would take me away from home too much. So I don't think I'm ambitious, but when I get into something, I can be very competitive and determined, as you say.
Do you get nervous? When it comes to the likes of the Eurovision, all I think of is the quantity of numbers who watch, particularly at that time when it was I remember sitting down, watching all of those shows as a family. It was just what you did. It was a huge, and not that it still isn't, it is, of course, but particularly then it was a huge thing. How do you prepare for something like that mentally as well as
assiduously? I mean, there was no stone left unturned. There was a big kind of army of people in RTE who were taking care and preparing, and you'd go for French conversation classes. But I had lived in France for a year, so I really enjoyed the conversation classes. And then you would go through the mock scoreboards, and every kind of car crash that could happen was put to you. And then, like the week it was the point. Then, like everything was rehearsed so well. It was an absolute thrill. I actually felt it was an honour and a privilege. I felt I was representing RTE, but in a way also you're representing your country. You know, so it was lovely because there were gatherings and parties that you go to and be there to represent the station and your family and, you know, that kind of thing. It was an absolute joy. And I actually don't think I was... the whole crew were hugely nervous. I can remember Gary Kavanagh was doing my hair and his hand was shaking. And I said, "Gary, relax, we've done this before." And people doing makeup were kind of afraid it would be smudged. They'll get on the dress. And I think when that happens, you kind of... I don't get too stressed and I don't get too worked up. So, no, I don't think I was hugely nervous. I also concentrated on little pockets of people, as you describe your family, sitting watching their telly, not kind of 800 million in one go. You know, that would be a bit awe-inspiring.
So you manage stress very well, or you seem to. And being
sometimes. Yeah.
What stresses you then?
Well, I don't kind of stress much now, and I certainly don't stress about, because some people would say, well, you know, you're heading into retirement, and I don't have like a 40-year pension. I've only been staff for 15 years, and people say, oh God, you know, but I never, and I think I was brought up like that. We never had much in Clondalkin. I never stress about money. I always feel that, you know, there's always things you can do. But I did put, I stress, I'd say, if I have something that I know I've just stretched myself too much and I'm going to have to be, it's going to take me a while to get from A to B. I hate to be late. And I did kind of go through a period where I took on too much and I suffered a bit of... Now, I don't call it burnout because I know burnout is a very serious condition and people can take up to 2 years to recover from it. But I did get to a stage where I was definitely running on empty. I was, and I did have some of the symptoms. It was the summer of 2017. I wasn't sleeping. I had these little shortness of breath, almost like as if you're going to have a hiccup and then you don't. This kind of... weird, and palpitations, and I phoned my GP because I just was a little bit, I said, I'm having these symptoms. He said, are you stressed about anything? And I said, no, I don't think so. But that's when you have to take stock. And then all of a sudden, I suppose the pivotal moment was I was at home and I was listening to Ryan Tubridy, and he was interviewing a 28-year-old woman who was working in marketing and was talking about the fact that really in her company, you know, if you left work at 5:30 or 6, it was frowned on. I said, that is madness. But she felt that and she threw it all up and she went to Portugal and she opened a coffee shop. And she was describing the same symptoms. And I said, hang on here now, Mary. Okay. You know, I think work-life balance is so important.
So that was a wake-up call to address your work-life balance.
Yes. And I did make a few changes. Well, first of all, I took 2 weeks off.
A whole 2 weeks?
A whole 2 weeks. No, but Carl, a whole 2 weeks without going somewhere.
Okay.
And my kids said, you won't last 2 weeks. You won't last 2 weeks here at home without going somewhere. Now, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but I was very laid back. And I also did the technology thing, you know, not checking the phone in the bedroom last thing at night, because that is totally addictive. And it just wakes you up.
Of course.
And then you lie there and you say, why can't I sleep? And I drink decaf tea now going to bed instead of, because I love tea.
Okay, so simple lifestyle changes helped you to recharge the batteries better because you weren't.
Yeah, but also to take stock and not to kind of run to that degree. I think it's very important. I think it's all very fine for people to say, oh yes, I'm in a very high-powered job and I'm happy to stay on till 11 o'clock at night. That's very impressive if you're kind of charging up a career ladder, but you pay for it. I really do think you pay for it. I have huge regard for people who just set their standards, if you like, and say, okay, I want to be able to pay my mortgage. I want to be able to go on a holiday. I want to be able to pay for my children to go to art classes or ballet classes or whatever. But I also want to be able to take them to those art classes and those ballet classes. It's not like you're loads of money and not having the time to be kind of cash rich and time poor, I think is the worst case scenario.
So it's finding out for you what was important for you and establishing those kind of boundaries.
Yeah, but I'd also be prepared to give advice to people who think that being that cash rich is okay for them. I don't think anybody gets away scot-free with it. I think you pay in the end. Like, how many people have you met who are really kind of well known maybe and very wealthy and coming maybe to the end of their careers and saying, yeah, but like I wasn't there when the kids were going to school. I mean, it's just so sad because really in the end of the day, it's about relationships. It's about the way you connect with people, the way you spend your time with people. It's not about racing to a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning, being on no. But it's very hard to kind of take that on because people feel that is very impressive. We are impressed by people who do that.
And was learning to say no something that came with that kind of control or that realignment
totally.
of what was important for
totally.
you.
And, you know, it is hard to say no when you're asked by somebody to maybe MC an event that's for a charity and a fundraiser. And I love doing it, but you have to I had to realise that you can't do them all. You have to pick your favourites. And there are some, like, I mean, I work with the Vincent de Paul in my own parish. I think it's important to be part of your community if you can and if you want to. Myself and Marty Whelan from the very beginning have been patrons of the Family Carers Ireland, used to be the Carers Association, and there's one or two others. Like I love helping out Debbie Deegan. She's a woman I admire greatly. A.D. Roach. I'll do anything for A.D. Roach. Well, anyway, no matter what, it's very hard to say no to A.D. Roach. But you have to. Peter McVerry, I love doing something for his charity every year. And it would be lovely to be able to say yes all the time, but it's just not. Like,
especially once you've hit burnout and you know what that feels like, you realise that you have to mind. There's a huge quantity of minding that you have to do.
Yeah, because like mental well-being is as important as physical well-being. And I mean, obviously you're the expert in physical well-being, but I do feel that we have to pay attention to the other aspect of our health. Mm-hmm. And thankfully people are talking about it more. And, you know, I mean, I, for one, I'm a person who engages in counselling, you know, and I go once a month. Now, obviously, I began going at a time of turmoil in my life. But when that moment had passed, a lot of people say, okay, that's it, that's fine. I continued. And I go once a month, and I just find it so therapeutic, which is the way it's supposed to be. But also it gives an ease. It gives a feeling of self. And it's incredible, the things that you learn about yourself when you're not trying to deal with a crisis, that you're there just to discuss. And what I have learned is that the mental health is so important, and keeping it good, if you can, is just a gift. And like what I've learned about myself is also that when you explore your inner self and your mental health, you are able to have the confidence and the courage to show vulnerability. And when you show vulnerability, you know, like even there's a lot of people who wouldn't admit to going to counselling. Mm-hmm. It's good for me, and I think it's good for other people to hear it from somebody like me.
To have someone on our show who is open to saying that is epic. For that reason, because it takes the stigma away from it. It takes the fear from people listening in, and the ability to talk and listen is incredibly powerful. And at the end of the day, that's what counselling is. It's you talking, someone listens and guides you along to talk about stuff you may not want to talk about, and it's incredibly powerful and not to be feared in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's a positive thing. It really is a positive thing, and it gives me a sense of well-being in the same way as exercise would give me a sense of well-being. But, well, I was going to say for different reasons, but no, not for different reasons, because I like to, it used to be running, now it's jogging, but it gives me, obviously, it's the box ticked, but also it's good for my mental well-being. It just is, you know, I feel better after I go out for a run. I just do, you know.
Folks, you're listening to the Real Help podcast in association with Leia Healthcare with me, Carl Henry. I really hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. When I asked Mary to come on, I was really cheeky on Twitter. I sent her a DM and she said she was going to come in. I rang Dara, my producer, straight away, all giddy and hyper, purely because it's so interesting getting to chat to people like yourself. It's fascinating. I'm going to talk about running in a minute. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. I want to just chat about career highs and lows. I know the Eurovision must be won by this, just listening to you talk about it already, but are there a couple of standout things career-wise that you look back on and you think that was just, I loved that, or, you know?
Yeah, well, there are, and I suppose because I'm at this point where I'm, you know, about to move on from Nationwide, I have been thinking about it. And I the very first time I ever went to the developing world was because I was asked to go and do the commentary on the funeral of Mother Teresa in Calcutta. Wow. And that was 1997. And I went with Father Dermot McCarthy, who was head of religious programmes in RT at the time. Now, he was one of the people who did all those Ryerk films in Africa, and he knew the place. For me, it was like landing on another planet. I will never forget it. I remember everything about it, the noise, the smells, the Dermot telling me, just eat things that you can peel and do not use anything other than bottled water. And that was all new to me. But it started with me a huge appreciation and regard for the developing world, actually the countries. They are so beautiful, and the people and the simplicity. And I have been back so many times, and I do credit that trip to India to cover Mother Teresa's funeral as having introduced. That is a huge high point, because I've also been able to persuade Nationwide to go and do a few programs in Africa, which kind of comes, I suppose, out of passion and interest. So that would be, yes. I really I love the commentaries. But that's because, as you say, I'm very determined. And I'm also conscientious and I suppose a little bit studious. I love being given like a brief for a commentary. Be it a state funeral or most recently Lord Reston Gay Byrne's funeral. And you take your reams and you bring them home, and I sit at the kitchen table with my highlighter and just go through it item by item and piece by piece, and there's a great satisfaction then when you feel that you've paid homage to whatever that event was. That would be a highlight. Highlights for me with regard to Nationwide would be the at-homes. I loved doing at-homes, and one that I loved Big Tom and the Mainliners. Mm-hmm. He was so funny, and he died. Well, we went and I did it with him and his wife, and both of them had died within the year. So it was lovely, and we were able to put it out again then afterwards as a kind of a tribute to him. And like, this is a real person who's living, never really moved away from where he grew up in Castleblaney, and. But like, he's an icon, an absolute icon of country music here in Ireland, but also around the world. And to just kind of appreciate the simplicity of the man, the humour of the man, and the huge talent and skill, and the humanity that would be a highlight for me as well. But there were so many. I don't like to kind of single anybody out particularly,
And I'm going to flip that in terms to career lows is probably the wrong word, but tough times and how you dealt with them.
In broadcasting?
Yeah, over the course of the last 40 years.
I enjoyed
were there any?
No, I enjoyed every single thing I did. I mean, obviously, you'd be very nervous in the very beginning. I was shaking going in to make a simple 10-second announcement. But no, I mean, maybe when I went for the audition for the Eurovision, and you have to cope with rejection and failure. Yeah. I was very sad when I was no longer kept on as the presenter of Up for the Match, but that was fine as well. Like, change is good. They wanted somebody else. Gráinne Seoige did a fabulous job, but like, you just have to take those on the chin, and nothing lasts forever. Myself and Marty were both very sad when Open House finished, and in actual fact, that summer, our dog Patch was the dog in the Abbey as part of the Chocron. And I can remember giving an interview because, there was a lot of interest in the fact that Open House was finishing. And a headline in one of the papers was, I must have given them the line, obviously, was that for that summer, the only person working in Mary Kennedy's house was the dog. Because he was in the Abbey every night.
So you're an optimist then, without a doubt.
Yeah, I do try to live in the moment. Yeah. I'm happy. I'm happy. The French have an expression, je suis bien dans ma peau. I'm happy in my skin. And like, I'm quite calm. I love the fact that I love this age that I'm at, and I love it because I am healthy, thank God, and I work on fitness. My kids are grown up, and 2 of them are married. They're all, they've all got jobs. They're all healthy. I mean, those are great gifts. And I know from having done stories with people who maybe have a sick child, that is absolutely heartbreaking. So I'm very grateful for what I have. And I like people. I like travelling. I love going around the country. My sister lives on the Aran Islands. I love going over to spend time there with her, and she's a very good influence because she's into Celtic spirituality and yoga and things like that. So there's always little moments like that when we go over to her.
Very cool.
Yeah, and she's got friends over there who are equally into yoga and mindfulness and swimming in the cold water. That's one thing I don't join her with.
They're hardy souls over there.
They're hardy, yeah. It meets the Mediterranean or nothing.
For sure. As we chat, I've been admiring the Fitbit on your wrist.
I'm competitive about that.
It doesn't surprise me. Chat to me about health then. So you mentioned running was something you did, 40 years ago out in Belfield. You still run to this day. So let's talk about health and exercise.
I'd be conscious of it. I mean, there are periods. There have been periods where it's just been so busy, where you just haven't had time to get out and go for a run, and I don't like that. I only go 3 times a week, but I'd like to do it early in the morning, because then it's done, and it's done. And also I get tired, and I do anything to put it off then otherwise. But yeah, it's important. I mean, my father died of a heart attack playing golf at the age of 59. Now, I'm 65. I've already lived 6 years more than he has. And, that's something that registers with me because it was an absolute, a catastrophic loss to our family, And I can't countenance if anybody that I know and love were to have died. I'm very lucky that all of my kind of peers are still healthy and, but I think we have more of an awareness of health and the necessity to eat healthily. Not all the time, I reckon...
80-20 is the approach, yeah. 80% of the time you stay healthy and 20% you have the treat.
Monday to Thursday.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I would view it. It is important, but I think what does they say? All things in moderation. Yeah. Especially moderation.
And the Fitbit works for you then, because even from chatting to you now, you're competitive without a doubt. You like the measure of it, I would imagine, and the challenge of having to hit a certain number of...
Oh, yeah. And I got it as a Christmas present from my friend Anita not last Christmas, the Christmas before. And... I used to have it on my phone, but then you wouldn't have your phone necessarily with you when you'd be going out walking or, So I do. I like to definitely get over the 10. And I remember I was over with my son for his 30th. I went over to see him in Melbourne, and one day we did 24,000 steps because just walking around, and I said yes. And you just get kind of a kick out of that.
Yeah, setting a goal, hitting a target, and overachieving the target. There's a lovely sense of winning in that.
Well, if I do nothing tomorrow, it's fine.
Let's chat social media then. So I was fascinated to see how active you are on Twitter.
You're incredibly active. Spasmodic, it's sporadic. I'm not. Sometimes I can be very active. Well, we're expected to promote our program. And we do. I do, Anne does. Some of the independent producers that work with us do as well. Yeah, we're expected to. But I actually love. I love photographs, so I tend to go now onto Instagram and then put Twitter on it as well. Okay. So there's so it's both. I find it very gentle, and. I like Instagram particularly.
Have you ever had a negative experience on either
Oh
platform?
yeah, not everybody doesn't love you. You know, I mean that kind of thing. No, nothing never on Instagram. I don't think it's possible. Really, I actually don't think it's possible.
Yeah.
It's so.
Twitter's far more a platform of opinion
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
Instagram by
Yeah.
a mile.
Yeah.
And how do you handle that then?
I just ignore it.
Okay.
Absolutely ignore it, because all you're doing is adding fuel to the fire. Definitely no. And that's what people want, you know, as a reaction. So no.
Okay. Is there anything in terms of, as you look at society now, if you were to, you know, give advice to your 20-year-old self starting out, or, you know, people listening in terms of life and in terms of the lessons that you've learned, are there anything that sticks out in terms of advice that you would give them?
From my own point of view,
Yeah, well, just
from, the way
from a life lived, a fantastic life lived, and a fantastic career.
Certainly, I was very self-conscious, but like we're talking like a different Ireland, you know. As I said to you when we were leaving school, the advice from our nuns, who were very caring people, was, don't get above yourself. You know, like that's, whereas it's different. I think like a balance is good. I would certainly feel that I was very hard on myself. I thought I could always do better. I thought I was fat, and when I look back at photographs, I was anything but. But that's true. I did.
Really?
Yeah. Because I didn't have the kind of the figure that you would be seeing on magazines or on Top of the Pops or things like that, you know. But I do think that is something I would say to people, because I see it with my with my own daughters. They might look back at a photograph of 10 years ago and say, gosh, you know, I didn't look bad then, did I? And it's just, I think it's ingrained in us to just be hard on ourselves. I would definitely say to people to strike that work-life balance. And like, career ambition is good, but it should be measured and not kind of extremist. I just, like, there's an awful lot of hot air around things like that. And it's very hard to reach a pinnacle, and therefore one can be disappointed. So I think, as I said earlier, that would be my advice, to have enough, but not to be greedy. And also to young mothers, and I say it to my own daughter, not to be rushing off to fill the dishwasher because the baby is happy playing with something. No, the dishwasher will be filled at some point, or the clothes will be washed at some stage. But I know I was guilty of that. I would say, okay, they're happy now. Ding, ding, ding. 3 jobs done. I'm back. And then take over the duties again, rather than just enjoy the moment. Because I really do feel it's about connection with people is what makes life worthwhile. And to enjoy every stage, because I don't espouse this belief that, you know, to be beautiful you have to be young, and to kind of try to hold on to this. I heard somebody talking on social media recently about, there was a headline in the paper, advice, I think it might have been a supplement even, on advice to women on how to age gracefully. Why should we age gracefully? Like, and she I'm not taking the credit for this. She said, I've never seen a headline showing men how to age gracefully. Duh. I think age is a lovely thing, because there's a huge experience and there's a huge wisdom, and there's now an energy around it. There's a quote that I've used in some, because I write books, but I like to include quotes in them. And this one was, first you are young, then you are middle-aged, then you are old, now you are beautiful. Because you are an accumulation of all of the different stages in life. And, you know, it's there's a wholeness to it, which I think is nice.
If there's one word I can use to summarize the last kind of 30 minutes or so, it's it's contentment.
Yeah.
You've got an amazing air of just someone who's incredibly content with what they've done and content with themselves as they are. And if we can strive to achieve even half of the contentment that you have, I think we're all doing really, really well, because it's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, I do feel very content, and I am very content, but I'm also very grateful. And I'm also very aware that I had great opportunities, and I relish every one of them. You know, going to interesting places in Ireland, being welcomed by different communities, going to different parts of the world, and being afforded these opportunities by the work that I've done. So, yeah, and also being invited to write a book, to come in here, all of those things, you know.
If people want to follow you on social media, I know I do, but what are your handles for Twitter, for Instagram?
I think Instagram is, at Mary Kennedy RTE.
Okay.
And I think Twitter is the reverse. Could it be? No, Kennedy Mary. I knew there was a reverse thing.
Okay,
yeah.
so Kennedy Mary on Twitter
I
and
think.
Mary Kennedy
but
RTE
can't you
on
just
Instagram.
go into the little magnifying glass and put in the
search
name?
it.
And
You can. So, folks, if you're listening in, you can also do that. And trust me,
the old-fashioned way.
I followed Mary's accounts for a long time. They're well worth following. And in terms of the book, tell us a bit about that.
Well, I haven't got a book at the moment. I've written 5 books, and they're all kind of reflections, and they're on the different stages, like they're like on the different stages of life. And I've been very lucky to have been invited by Hachette to write these books. I've one like on middle age, one on empty nests, one on the last one, which came out this time last year, was called Home Thoughts from the Heart. You know, so it's just that kind of thing. The one before that was What Matters, Reflections on Important Things in Life. You know, those kind of things. It's just whatever.
So, folks, if you like what you've heard on the podcast over the course of the last half hour, and available in all good bookstores, and I'm sure online too, you can have a look at some of Mary's books. Mary Kennedy, I have to say, that was a joy of a 35-minute chat.
Well, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Carl.
so much for coming in.
Not at all.
When I sent that DM, I said, fingers crossed you'll come in, and you have done. Folks, that is all for this week's episode of the Real Health Podcast in association with Leia Healthcare with me, Carl Henry. I really hope that you've enjoyed it and you've taken so much from the episode. As I said, I think the word to summarise it is contentment, because you can hear it in Mary's voice as she talks. And I think if we can all strive to have even half of that contentment in our voice and in our lives, we'll be doing really, really well. As ever, you know where we are on Twitter and on Instagram. It's at CarlHenryPT. You can send us an email. It's realhealth@independent.ie. And don't forget to rate and review as ever. And we'll see you next week. Thanks a mil. Slán.
Leia Healthcare. It's good to live. Proud sponsor of the Real Health Podcast with Carl Henry.